everybody, welcome back to Polymer Clay TV. This week I'm going to talk to you about the Studio by Sculpey texture makers, and I'm going to show you a fun project that you can make that really brings them all together and lets you do something cool with chipboard and uses the clay and the texture makers to their best abilities. So what we have laid out here are some texture makers. These are my favorite ones. We've got this swirly kind of Victorian design. This one's leafy. This one's spirals. This one it really looks like lace when you press it into the clay. And this one is interesting because these are actually depressions in the texture sheet that cause a raised kind of viney design. And the way these come, they are 2 to a pack. This is the Nature Walk. So in this package there's a pebbly, like a small cobblestone, and a larger one that kind of looks like a stone patio. And you can get these in a lot of different places, and you know, including like AC Moore, and a really good place to get them is Monroe Crafts because they're half price. So I also rolled out some clay. This is about 4 Tootsie Rolls of Iris, and it's rolled out to a number 1. And I'm going to be using my acrylic rod, and I encourage you to check out Polymer Clay Classroom because there is where I'm going to do this project. And what I've done here is I've taken a chipboard bird that was really supposed to be like an album cover, a small album, and I traced around it onto some green clay for a backing, and then I used strips of the yellow clay. This is sunny side up. Looks like an egg yolk to me. And I laid them out, cut them into the shape of the bird, and then I baked the whole thing so it's all one piece. And it's great. This is going to end up as a wall hanging. And it's perfect for this because it's lightweight, and I can actually come back and, like, if I want to drill holes in it or add more clay, this clay is very forgiving. So let me show you how to use the texture makers. Alright, so I preconditioned this a little bit, but I'm going to run it through my pasta machine a couple more times. I had rolled it to a number 1, but for my purposes right now I think I'm going to take it down to a 3. And depending on the size of the chipboard or the other object, maybe like a picture frame that you want to cover, you should try to get a nice long piece of clay. And the great thing about studio clay, if you haven't tried it yet, you really ought to give it a try. And one of the things that I always tell my students is that anytime you're trying a new type of clay, you have to remember this is a new clay. It is not Primo, for example. It's different. It has some kind of fiber in it. It feels very almost fabric-like when you run your hand over the surface. It tends to have scrubbly edges, and it takes a little while to condition it down to a smooth edge all the way around. And sometimes I don't even bother with that because I'm going to be using it for something where I'm going to cut it anyway. So you just have to remember it's not what you're used to, and it has different working properties, and you're going to need to treat it differently. You're probably going to want to spend some time just conditioning it, playing with it, rolling it around in your hands, try to sculpt something out of it, try to mold it, and just see how it reacts. It reacts differently than the polymer clays that we're used to from, the old school polymer clays. It's just not the same. Therefore, when people say I hate it, I ask them, have you practiced with it? Because I've used Primo and Sculpey 3 and Kato and Fimo, like Fimo Soft, my whole life, and every time I learned a new clay I had to learn a new set of rules for working with it. and I discovered I don't like Fimo. It's too hard for my hands. Same thing with Kato. I just don't like the feeling of working with it. It's not my clay, and you'll find there's a clay for you. There are so many different brands now that it's worth giving them all a shot and figuring out, you know, I like this clay for home decor and small sculpture type beads. I like Primo for other things. I like Cernit for sculpting fairies and doll parts. There's a different clay for everything, and there's one for you. So, long story short, this clay is not the same as the other clays you've used, and you might need to just give it a shot before deciding if you don't like it or not. So I'm going to use that Scrolly texture maker, and you notice I don't need a mold release with this clay and these texture makers. They were made to go together, and they definitely do. So I'm just going to use my roller, and I'm going to gently start putting some pressure on this to get it stuck to the clay a little bit. And you can see, because it's clear on the back here, I can see when it's starting to make an impression because the scrolls are turning purple. They were green before, now they're stuck down to the clay. So I'll apply a little bit more pressure. Not too much. I'm not really pressing hard. Lift up the corner, make sure I did a good job. I could do more. There we go. So now I'm going to gently peel it up off my work surface. And at this point you could decide, you know, which part of this is the best. I see along this kind of line right here, this whole strip is a really great impression. So I'm going to trim it there and here. Okay, so this piece is actually pretty good too, so I'm sure I could use that for something else. But this is the piece I'm looking for. A nice straight edge piece that I can use as part of a design for the next chipboard book, or for the edge of a picture frame, or even if I cut it down and find the most interesting parts, I could even use this as pieces of a mosaic. So, you know, like there's a piece, there's another good piece right here. You could make maybe pottery shard type jewelry out of it. There's a lot of different things you could do. So enjoy your texture makers. Don't forget to check out Polymer Clay Classroom for the whole project. And come back next week for Polymer Clay Podcast. See you next time.